Hello, my friends, and welcome to Night Whisper. This is a quiet place where we drift together into unanswered skies, slowly, calmly, and without fear. Here, we don't rush toward conclusions. We listen, we observe, and we let the mystery breathe. If these stories bring you a sense of calm or keep you company through the night, you're always welcome to stay with us. Subscribing gently helps this space grow, and it allows more quiet minds to find their way here. You can also leave a soft, like if the story helps you relax, unwind, or feel less alone beneath the night sky. And if any thoughts rise as you listen, you are welcome to share them in the comments below. And just out of quiet curiosity, where are you listening from tonight? I love seeing how far these whispers travel through the dark. Chapter 1. The Quiet Call of the Wilderness. There is a feeling many people recognize, even if they have never put words to it. It arrives quietly, not like excitement, not like fear, more like a soft tug on the inside of the chest. A gentle reminder that somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the roads and schedules and screens, there is open space waiting. It might come while watching sunlight spill across a mountain ridge in a photo, or while listening to wind move through trees outside a window late at night. Or maybe it comes after a long day, when the noise of the world finally fades and something deeper stirs. That feeling whispers, go outside. For some, it means a short walk in a local park. For others, it grows into something bigger. A desire to stand beneath wide skies, to walk trails that curve out of sight, to breathe air that smells like pine, stone, and rain. This is how millions of people find their way into America's national parks every year. These places are often described as peaceful, even healing. Vast forests, endless deserts, mountains that feel older than memory itself. When people talk about them, they talk about freedom, escape, a return to something simpler and more honest. You leave behind traffic, notifications, expectations. You step onto a trail, and suddenly your world narrows in the best possible way. One step, one breath, one moment at a time. It feels safe, and most of the time it is. But woven quietly into these landscapes is another truth we rarely speak about unless something goes wrong. Sometimes people don't come back. Not often. Not dramatically. Sometimes it's just a single sentence in a local news report. Hiker overdue. Search underway. Family asks for privacy. And then, just as quietly, the story fades. Another headline replaces it. Another day moves on. But for the people involved, time does not move on. Not at all in recent years, especially around 2024 and 2025. These stories have begun to resurface in a different way. Not as isolated incidents, but as pieces of a larger question. Online discussions began connecting dots. Maps appeared marked with pins and clusters. Videos asked late-night questions in hushed tones. Is this just coincidence, or is there something more happening out there? The idea is compelling. A mystery hidden in plain sight. Vast parks. Missing people. Unanswered questions. It feels like the beginning of a legend, and legends have power. But before we let our minds drift too far, it helps to slow down. To take a breath. To step back onto solid ground. Because this story is not about panic. It's about understanding. It's about looking at these disappearances with clear eyes and calm curiosity. About separating what feels mysterious from what actually is. About honoring the people involved. Not by turning their stories into myths, but by learning from them. When you begin to examine the subject carefully, something interesting happens. The mystery doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. At its center are real people. People who woke up excited for a hike. Parents who packed snacks for a day outdoors. Experienced walkers who had done similar trails dozens of times before. People who did not expect anything unusual to happen. Because most days, nothing unusual does. And that's part of why these cases capture attention so strongly. We like to believe that preparation guarantees safety, that experience protects us, that technology fills in the gaps. But the wilderness has its own rules, and it doesn't explain them out loud. National parks are not designed spaces. They are preserved spaces. Trails are thin lines drawn across enormous, complex systems. Weather forms its own plans. Terrain hides angles and distances the human eye isn't good at judging. A slope that looks gentle can exhaust you faster than expected. A sound that seems close can be miles away. And then there's scale. On a map, a trail looks manageable. On a screen, a forest looks contained. But standing inside it, surrounded by trees that all look the same, direction becomes something you feel rather than know. Have you ever been sure you were walking the right way, only to feel a flicker of doubt moments later? That flicker matters. Studies on lost person behavior show something simple and surprising. People rarely realize they are lost right away. Instead, they feel almost certain they're still on track. They keep walking, hoping the trail will reappear, hoping the view will look familiar again, hoping the next turn will make sense of everything. Hope, in these moments, is not dramatic. It's quiet, and it can be misleading. Technology, for all its benefits, adds another layer to this illusion. A phone feels like a safety net. A GPS dot feels like certainty. But batteries drain. Signals vanish. Terrain interferes. And when the screen goes dark, the silence feels heavier than it would have years ago. None of this means the wilderness is hostile. It means it is honest. Nature does not adjust itself to human expectations. It doesn't warn you when you've crossed a threshold. It doesn't announce when conditions are changing. It simply continues being what it is. This is why these disappearances matter beyond numbers. Statistically, there are rare millions visit national parks every year, and the vast majority leave safely. But each case carries weight because it reveals where our assumptions fail, where confidence meets complexity, where calm turns into confusion. And beyond the individual, there are ripples, families waiting for updates, search teams assembling at dawn, rangers retracing steps again and again, communities holding their breath. These are not abstract ideas. They are lived experiences, repeated quietly across decades. Over time, people began to notice similarities between cases. Water nearby, sudden weather shifts, experienced hikers, certain types of terrain. These observations sparked curiosity, then speculation, then stories that traveled faster than facts. Humans are pattern-seeking by nature. It's how we learn. It's how we survive. When something feels threatening or unexplained, our minds search for structure. We connect dots. We imagine causes. Sometimes those connections are meaningful. Sometimes they are simply reflections of where we're looking. Psychologists call this heightened awareness the moment when learning about something makes it feel suddenly everywhere. Not because it increased, but because attention did. And attention, once focused, changes perception. This doesn't make curiosity wrong. It makes it human. The goal of this journey is not to dismiss questions, but to ground them. To explore what the data actually shows. To listen to search and rescue professionals who spend their lives in these environments. To understand how people behave under stress. To see the wilderness as it truly is: beautiful, powerful, and indifferent. Because when we replace fear with understanding, something shifts. We stop imagining shadows where there are none, and we start noticing the real risks that quietly exist. Risks that can be prepared for. Risks that can be respected. This knowledge doesn't take away wonder. It deepens it. When you understand how easily sound can bend in a canyon, the silence feels more profound. When you realize how fast weather can change at altitude, the clouds feel more alive. When you learn how disorientation works, every trail marker feels more meaningful. Awareness sharpens appreciation, and it fosters humility. The wilderness does not demand fear. It asks for respect, for preparation, for the willingness to stop when uncertain, to admit when something feels off, to turn back when pride whispers just a little further. These are quiet lessons, easy to overlook, easy to ignore, until something goes wrong. As this story unfolds, we'll move closer to the people at the heart of these moments. Those who search, those who wait, those who study and argue and analyze, and slowly, patiently, We'll see how a mystery can exist without monsters, how silence can speak without secrets. For now, let this idea settle gently. The wilderness is calling not to frighten, not to lure, but to remind us that we are visitors in a world that doesn't bend to us. And sometimes, the most important thing it teaches is how small and how careful we need to be. The first silence begins, not in the forest, but in the moment someone realizes a familiar trail has gone quiet. Chapter 2. When the trail goes silent, it usually begins with something small. So small that, at first, no one thinks to worry. A phone that doesn't ring when it should. A car still sitting in the parking lot after sunset. A headlamp that never appears down the trail. At first, people explain it away. Maybe the hike took longer than expected. Maybe there's no signal. Maybe they decided to camp an extra night. Nature encourages patience. After all, it teaches us not to rush to conclusions. But then time stretches. Minutes become hours. Hours lean into night, and the calm optimism that filled the day begins to thin. Slowly, quietly, like mist lifting from the ground. This is the moment when the trail goes silent. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just empty. For a family member waiting back at camp, the silence feels strange. Before it feels frightening. There's a constant checking of the phone, a glance down the trail every few minutes. A listening for footsteps that never arrive. You tell yourself not to overreact. You don't want to be that person. The one who panics too early. Have you ever waited for someone, certain they'd appear any second, only to feel that certainty slowly dissolve? That feeling is the doorway. Once crossed, there's no going back to how things felt before. In national parks, this moment often triggers a careful process. Rangers are trained not to jump straight into alarm, but they also know the difference between delay and danger. They ask questions. Who was the hiker? How experienced were they? What was the plan? What gear did they carry? What time were they expected back? Each answer shapes what comes next. But for the people waiting, those questions can feel unreal, too orderly for the chaos unfolding inside. They replay conversations in their mind. Did I hear them correctly? Did they say they were taking the loop trail or the ridge? Did I notice what they packed? Details certainly matter in a way they never did before. The wilderness has a way of magnifying small choices. After the fact, if the hiker is still missing by nightfall, the atmosphere changes. Headlights sweep across parking lots. Radios crackle. Boots crunch against gravel. The quiet beauty of the park shifts into something more focused, more tense. A search may begin. But here's what most people don't realize. Search and rescue is not instant. It's not a switch that flips the moment someone is overdue. It's a measured response, shaped by probabilities, weather, terrain, and time. Because every search carries risk, not just for the missing person, but for those who go looking. Still, when enough time passes, hesitation gives way to action. The silence has spoken. For the missing hiker, this silence feels very different. Out on the trail, the moment things begin to feel wrong is often subtle. A trail marker that doesn't appear where expected. A fork in the path that looks unfamiliar. A turn taken with confidence that slowly turns into doubt. People rarely stop immediately. They keep walking. They tell themselves it'll make sense soon. That they've just missed a sign. That the map will line up in a moment. This is not foolishness, it's human nature. Our minds prefer continuity. They resist the idea that something has gone off course, and the wilderness does not interrupt to correct us. Instead, it grows quieter. Sounds change when you move deeper into unfamiliar terrain. Footsteps seem louder. Wind moves differently. Even birds fall silent at times, leaving a stillness that feels heavier than noise. That silence can be calming at first, peaceful, even until it isn't. Imagine standing alone on a trail that no longer feels like a trail. Trees that all look the same, rocks without markings. The sky shifting toward evening, the realization creeping in not suddenly, but steadily that you don't know exactly where you are. Not lost. Not yet. Just unsure. This is the most dangerous moment, according to many search experts. Not when panic takes over, but when uncertainty still feels manageable. When people believe they can fix the situation by moving forward, they keep going. Every step feels reasonable in the moment. Every choice feels small. But with each decision, the distance between them and certainty quietly grows. Back at camp or at home, the silence continues to stretch. Families begin to feel a strange split in time. One part of the mind clings to hope. The other begins preparing for outcomes it doesn't want to imagine. Conversations become short, repetitive. Any update? Have you heard anything? Friends offer reassurance, but it lands differently now. Comfort feels fragile. Words feel thin. Search and rescue teams work methodically. They don't chase theories. They follow patterns of human behavior. They start where the person was last seen. They consider terrain, likely routes, water sources, weather changes. They know that most people don't wander randomly. They follow lines, trails, ridges, streams, or they move downhill, believing it will lead somewhere safer. But nature doesn't always reward those instincts. As hours turn into a full day, the silence becomes something everyone can feel. It settles over the park like a held breath. Radios speak less. Conversations lower. Even the wind seems quieter. And yet, the park continues being what it has always been. Visitors hike nearby, unaware. The sun rises and sets. Animals move through the landscape without noticing human worry. The world does not pause. This contrast can feel surreal. How can something so serious exist inside something so ordinary? This is one reason these stories linger in the public imagination. They reveal a truth we don't often face. The world doesn't organize itself around our emergencies. Meaning doesn't announce itself. Silence doesn't explain itself. It simply exists. For search teams, silence is something to work against. Every hour matters. Weather shifts matter. Nightfall matters. They know that the first 24 to 48 hours are critical. Not because something dramatic happens, but because options narrow quietly. For families, silence becomes a space where imagination fills the gaps. Every possibility feels equally real. Every unknown feels heavy. Sleep becomes difficult. Time loses its normal shape. And for the missing person, if they are still moving, still thinking, still hoping, the silence can be both enemy and comfort. It removes distractions. It sharpens focus. It also isolates. Some people stop and wait. Others continue moving. Some leave signs. Some don't realize they should. There is no single way humans respond to being lost. That uncertainty is part of what makes these cases so hard to resolve, and so easy to misunderstand from the outside. Online, silence is rarely allowed to remain empty. It invites stories. Speculation rushes in. The absence of information becomes a canvas. People ask questions. They draw connections. They imagine explanations. But out in the park, there are no theories, only ground to cover, daylight to use, and the steady work of looking. The trail doesn't announce when it has gone silent. It doesn't mark the moment something changed. It simply waits. And the longer the silence lasts, the louder it feels to everyone touched by it. This chapter of the story is not about conclusions. It's about thresholds. The thin line between expected and overdue, between late and missing, between confidence and concern. Once crossed, everything feels different. And as the silence deepens, new people step forward, drawn not by mystery, but by responsibility. They are the ones who answer the quiet call that follows. As the silence settles in, others begin to move toward it, guided by maps, experience, and the weight of unanswered questions. Chapter 3. The Watchers and the Searchers. When someone disappears, the story expands almost immediately, not just across the park itself, but into the lives of everyone who notices, who cares, who might be able to help. The disappearance of a hiker is not a moment. It is a ripple reaching outward, gathering people, tools, and questions like leaves carried on a stream. At the center of that stream are the watchers and the searchers, the people who step forward when silence is stretched too long. They are the first responders, the planners, the record keepers, the families who will not rest. They operate in a rhythm of urgency and patience, moving with both purpose and humility, understanding that the wild has its own pace, its own rules, and its own secrets. The first of these are the search and rescue teams, known by their letters, SAR. They are anything but a single entity. They are a network of rangers, volunteers, helicopter pilots, canine handlers, and medics, each trained to see the forest and the canyon in ways most of us never will. Their eyes read the land differently. A fallen branch, a footprint in damp soil, a glint of color amid the greens and browns. They move through terrain that would feel insurmountable to most, guided by maps, intuition, and experience. Think for a moment about what it means to search for someone over hundreds of acres of rugged, untamed land, rocky outcrops, rivers that twist unexpectedly, ridges that rise and fall like waves frozen in stone. A simple path can vanish beneath undergrowth. A light breeze can erase footprints. Fog can hide a familiar landmark. Yet every hour counts. Every decision carries weight. The clock is not just a number. It is a measure of hope, of possibility, of time slipping past. Both those missing and those looking. There are stories that exemplify this silent dedication. One of them belongs to James Pruitt, who vanished in Rocky Mountain National Park in early 2019. Searchers moved across the snow in winter, soared above ridges in summer, scanned forests with dogs, helicopters, and infrared cameras, and still, after months and years, the trail remained empty. The mystery is unsolved, but the effort is a testament to human persistence and care. Alongside these trained professionals are volunteers. Some have personal experience with wilderness survival. Some simply respond to the quiet call of responsibility. They move together, guided by briefings and coordinated plans, but also by instinct. There is a rhythm to their work. Plan, search, regroup, plan again. And always they communicate. Radios hum, messages are logged. Every piece of information is recorded, analyzed, and cross-checked. Beneath all this is the human element that cannot be trained. Intuition, empathy, and endurance. For a SAR team member, the long hours, the cold or heat, the steep climbs, the uncertainties are all part of the day, but they are tempered by a singular focus: finding the missing person before the silence stretches further. Then there are families. Families who are in the quiet spaces of waiting rooms, of hotel rooms, of parking lots, hold hope like a fragile flame. Their eyes constantly scan news updates, social media feeds, and park announcements. Their minds replay every detail: the day of the hike, the phone call that said "I'm fine," the backpack left at home, the extra pair of socks. Each item becomes a touchstone, a memory, a clue. They live in a state psychologists call ambiguous loss. Neither closure nor certainty, just a weight of possibility. And this state does not fade quickly. Sometimes it remains for months, sometimes for years, sometimes forever. The weight of waiting is not easy to understand unless you have been there. Imagine the sun rising and setting over the same horizon you saw yesterday. The trail still empty, the phone still silent. Each passing hour sharpens awareness, deepens reflection, heightens anxiety, and yet, through it all, hope continues to flicker. Families become advocates. They write letters, call agencies, organize search efforts, post on forums. They are often the driving force behind sustained attention, ensuring the missing person is not forgotten. Independent investigators also stepped into this space. People like David Paulides, who has documented over 1,400 cases of missing persons in wilderness areas, attempt to discern patterns, whether geographical, temporal, or situational. His work, known through the Missing 411 series, has sparked debate. Supporters see threads that demand explanation: strange vanishings, failed canine tracking, hikers disappearing in clear weather. Skeptics challenge the methodology, pointing out that context, frequency, and human error often account for these anomalies. Regardless of perspective, Khalid's work illustrates a human desire for comprehension, for pattern, for narrative, our need to make sense of absence. Media amplifies these threads. A news story about a missing hiker spreads rapidly online. Images of last known photos, maps of trails, and interviews with anxious families circulate on social platforms. News outlets report updates, sometimes factual, sometimes dramatized. Viewers comment, share, and speculate. Threads multiply. Forums buzz. The ripple effect grows beyond the park, beyond local communities, into the global imagination. It is here that the watchers emerge. Online communities, armchair investigators, concerned citizens who trace patterns, comment on weather conditions, post historical maps, or offer advice based on personal experience. They're a chorus of curiosity, adding voices sometimes helpful, sometimes speculative. Reddit threads, TikTok videos, and interactive maps all contribute to collective engagement. A hiker's disappearance becomes a story shared across hundreds, even thousands, of invisible witnesses. And always, balancing these interpretations are skeptics and analysts. They examine claims against statistics, terrain difficulty, and visitor density. Researchers like Kyle Pollack show that most incidents align closely with known risks and population patterns. They remind us that not every coincidence is meaningful, that absence of evidence is not evidence of conspiracy, and that wilderness behaves according to natural rules, not human expectation. The interplay of all these roles, the searchers, the families, the investigators, the media, the online community, and the skeptics forms a delicate ecosystem. Each group acts from intention, curiosity, and concern. Each contributes to the unfolding narrative. Each affects perception, outcomes, and understanding. Within this ecosystem, the true challenge is not just the search, but managing expectation, emotion, and response. Search teams must balance speed with safety. Families must navigate grief, hope, and uncertainty. Investigators must weigh observation against assumption, and the public must discern fascination from facts. This chapter is about these intertwined human stories because the phenomenon itself cannot be understood without the people who animate it. The missing hiker is the pivot, but the watchers and the searchers give the narrative depth, context, and meaning. Together, they reveal an essential truth. Disappearance does not exist in isolation. Every missing person touches multiple lives, multiple systems, and multiple interpretations. And in every case, the wilderness remains constant, beautiful, indifferent, and enduring. This chapter invites reflection, not on fear, but on attentiveness, not on mystery, but on the human impulse to respond, not on absence, but on presence, the presence of those who care, who search, who hope, who chronicle, and who witness. Because in the quiet spaces of the national parks, where the trail has gone silent, it is these watchers and searchers who give form to the unseen. Their work is methodical, their dedication quiet, and their impact lasting. They are the living bridge between disappearance and understanding, between mystery and comprehension. And so, as our story continues, we begin to see that the phenomenon of missing hikers is more than a series of isolated events. It is a network of experiences, emotions, decisions, and actions, all unfolding quietly against the backdrop of vast, unchanged landscapes. Understanding these connections becomes the key to seeing the pattern, not as a shadowy force, but as the rhythm of human engagement with the wilderness. And as the watchers and searchers move through forest and canyons, another layer begins to emerge. The trails themselves, and the way the land shapes the stories we tell. Chapter 4. The land holds its secrets. If you have ever stood at the edge of a canyon, or paused in a dense forest, you might have felt it, the quiet awareness that the land itself has its own stories to tell. Not in words, not in signs we can always read, but in the subtle cues of terrain, light, and sound. Every hill, every stream, every bend in the path carries memory. Every footfall leaves an impression, and yet, somehow, the land seems to absorb it all, holding secrets silently, patiently, without judgment. It is here, in this stillness, that we begin to understand why hikers vanish and why their absence resonates so deeply. The wilderness is vast. It is layered. It is not able, but it is indifferent. And it is not immediately obvious where danger lies sometimes. It is in the things that look safest. A gentle slope may hide sudden drop-offs. A shallow stream may sweep away the unwary. Fog may turn familiar landmarks into alien shapes. A ridge bathed in sunlight may hide loose stones ready to slide with a single step. The land asks for attentiveness, for humility, for presence. Consider Yosemite's granite walls, smooth and towering, almost sculpted like monuments to patience. The park draws millions each year, people enchanted by the scale. The light reflecting off cliffs at sunset, the shimmer of rivers snaking through valleys. Most visitors return safely, their experiences fulfilling and serene. But the same granite that invites admiration can disorient. The repetition of color and texture, the echoing of steps against stone, the way light bends differently in canyons, all subtly distorts perception. A hiker may believe they are following a familiar route, only to discover that the trail they rely on is a mirror, slightly altered by shadows, an angle leading them just far enough off course to be invisible to the map in their mind. In the Grand Canyon, the challenge is different, but equally profound. From a distance, the land seems open, almost predictable. Ridges rise, sunlight illuminates paths, and the horizon feels accessible. But the scale is deceiving. Heat radiates from rock faces during midday. Water sources appear within reach, but hide treacherous currents, and trails can wind down to narrow ledges with sheer drops on either side. What appears simple becomes complex with a single misstep. A hiker who is confident, even experienced, can find themselves in a situation that unfolds faster than they can assess. Mount Rainier and Yellowstone offer their own lessons. Weather shifts abruptly. Fog rolls in from nowhere. Snow lingers in pockets that don't appear on maps. Rivers that seem shallow roar when melted snow increases flow overnight. The wilderness has its own clock, one that does not align with human schedules, and humans, naturally, attempt to overlay their expectations on this living, breathing landscape. Have you ever noticed how silence in the forest carries a sound of its own? Not the absence of noise, but a presence. Every bird call, every rustle of leaves, every trickle of water is amplified when you listen. And yet, there are moments when that sound falls away completely, leaving a stillness so profound it seems to weigh against the body itself. Hikers report these moments as unsettling, though not frightening. The forest or canyon seems to pause, as though holding its breath. And in that pause, a person may realize they are further from familiarity than they imagined, that the land is larger, deeper, more layered than they had understood. These natural features, granite walls, rivers, ridges, forests, weather form the backdrop against which disappearances occur. They are not conspiracies or mysteries in themselves, but they are part of a system that challenges the human mind and body. Disorientation often begins subtly. A forked trail that looks identical from one side, a fallen tree that temporarily obscures a marker, a sunlight glare reflecting off a river that masks the path beyond. Step by step, hour by hour, what seems familiar can transform into something entirely different. The land also has a rhythm. Daylight moves in a slow arc. Shadows shift. Temperature rises and falls. Wind changes direction. Animals follow patterns of movement that do not coincide with human expectation. Even something as simple as the growth of underbrush or the erosion of a trail over weeks and months can create invisible obstacles. For hikers unaware of these rhythms, the land appears static until it subtly shifts underneath them. It is not just physical disorientation that the land fosters, it is temporal as well. A hiker may start a trail in bright morning light and feel confident, only to find that, by late afternoon, the same landmarks have changed appearance. The same slope, which seemed gentle in morning light, now casts shadows that hide crevices. The river that seemed shallow now glimmers with currents. Time moves differently in the wild, and the human mind, trying to measure it against the familiar, can miscalculate even the simplest steps. Consider, too, how the land interacts with memory. The human brain relies on patterns. Trails are mapped in our minds through repetition, color, and landmarks. But when those patterns are subtly altered by fallen leaves, snow cover, or seasonal changes, they can betray confidence. A hiker may follow a mental map that seems accurate, only to discover the terrain has shifted beneath them. This is not a trick of the wilderness. It is simply the complexity of a living, changing environment. And so, when hikers vanish, the land itself is a silent participant. It does not act intentionally, but it shapes events. It tests perception, patience, and decision-making. It presents beauty and challenge in equal measure, inviting all while reminding humans of their limitations. To understand missing hiker cases, one must first acknowledge this omnipresent influence. The landscape is neither villain nor guide. It is simply their grand, patient, indifferent, waiting to be noticed, respected, and understood. Historically, search and rescue operations have adapted to these realities. Rangers learn the nuances of terrain and weather. Canine units are trained to track scent across varying landscapes. Helicopter teams watch the land from above, learning which areas might hide a person and which are unlikely. Each operation is tailored to the environment, acknowledging that the land can be as challenging as the missing person's situation. Even seasoned hikers are not immune. Experience helps, but it cannot eliminate the subtle ways the environment can mislead or delay. In some cases, familiarity with a park's layout can give a false sense of security, causing someone to underestimate the impact of environmental factors. A hiker may take shortcuts, ignore warnings, or misread signs, all within the bounds of what seemed rational moments before. It is in this balance of human capability and environmental complexity that most disappearances find their origin. Few are truly extraordinary. Most are quietly explainable choices made in ordinary moments, compounded by subtle but real challenges posed by the land. And yet, those ordinary moments, magnified by vastness and isolation, become extraordinary in experience. The land, then, holds its secrets, not through malevolence, but through scale, complexity, and consistency. Each ridge, each river, each shadowed forest patch is a participant in the story of disappearance. They create the context in which human decisions play out, where hope and anxiety intertwine, where searchers and families respond with care and courage. And while the land keeps these secrets, it also offers guidance. Trails exist for a reason. Markers are placed to assist. Clearings, campsites, and signs are deliberate attempts to make sense of the wilderness for human visitors. But they are only aids, never guarantees. The rest is up to observation, awareness, and respect for the environment's rhythms. By paying attention to these subtle signals, the texture of the trail underfoot, the pattern of river currents, the angle of sunlight on a cliff, the whisper of wind through trees, we begin to understand how the land interacts with human presence. The wilderness does not conspire. It does not target. It simply exists, vast and patient, shaping the stories of those who enter it. And so, when we look at the phenomena of missing hikers, the land itself becomes an unspoken character. Its lessons are silent. Its influence undeniable. Its beauty is inseparable from its challenge. Understanding it does not reduce wonder. It enhances it by teaching humility and attentiveness, by deepening awareness of how a single step, a moment of distraction, or a subtle shift in environment can ripple into consequences that echo far beyond the trail. The stories of the watchers, the searchers, the families, all of these are intertwined with the land. Without it, there would be no context, no challenge, no silence to fill with questions. The land is the stage, the background, and the unseen teacher, reminding us with every turn, every river, every shadow, that wilderness is both invitation and test, gentle and unforgiving, beautiful and indifferent. And as the land holds its secrets, the next chapter begins to explore the human mind, how perception, memory, and decision-making navigate these vast, patient spaces. Chapter 5. The Mind in the Wilderness. When a person steps into the wilderness, it is not only the land that becomes part of the story, it is the mind as well. The mind, which navigates streets, offices, and kitchens with effortless familiarity, suddenly encounters terrain that defies its usual rhythms. In the quiet expanses of national parks, where trails wind unpredictably and sunlight shifts through dense canopy, perception is challenged. Memory becomes less reliable, and decision-making takes on a delicate, almost invisible weight. Imagine walking along a familiar path. The soil underfoot is soft, patterned with the footprints of countless visitors before you. Birds flit above, and a stream hums somewhere ahead. At first, everything seems ordinary, almost comforting. But then subtly, almost imperceptibly, the surroundings shift. A bend in the trail reveals a new rock formation. Fallen branches obscure what was once a clear path. Shadows stretch differently than before, elongating in the late afternoon sun. The mind notes these changes, but without a conscious alarm, it recalibrates, assuming that familiar patterns still apply. And this is where disorientation begins, not as a sudden event, but as a quiet accumulation of small moments. When humans rely on habitual markers, the curve of a path, the sound of water, the shape of trees, any subtle alteration can throw calculations off. A hiker may believe they are moving straight, yet find that time and space no longer align with expectation. The brain is remarkably adaptable, but it is not infallible. Small deviations can compound, creating a situation in which the landscape feels subtly, disquietingly unfamiliar. Hikers often describe a peculiar sensation in these moments. It is not panic at first, not fear. It is a heightened awareness, a sense that something is slightly off. The air feels heavier, sounds are distorted, shadows shift in ways that seem impossible. A trail that looks simple in the morning now seems convoluted. It is in this silent recognition that most stories quietly begin, not with alarm, but with curiosity and caution. A hesitation that grows as the minutes stretch into hours. Cognitive psychology explains why this happens. Humans are wired to detect patterns and rely on memory to navigate familiar spaces. But the wilderness is deliberately complex, designed over millennia by wind, water, and geological forces, not by human expectations. Features change slowly over time, subtly or abruptly, with fallen trees, shifting streams, and seasonal snow. The mind attempts to fit these features into prior knowledge. Sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it misleads. A hiker may turn left, where a landmark seems to indicate right, or continue along a path that feels right, but leads farther from the intended trail. And then comes fatigue. Muscles grow heavy, legs ache, feet sink into soft earth, or crunch over rocks. The body signals for rest, but the mind, focused on progress, often dismisses these cues. Even minor exhaustion affects judgment. A wrong step, a glance misread, a sign overlooked, each small miscalculation adds another layer of complexity. Experienced hikers, accustomed to physical challenge, are not immune. The combination of environmental complexity and human limitation creates a space in which ordinary decisions become critical. Sometimes, the mind introduces illusions as well. A familiar tree may appear to have moved. A distant sound may be misattributed. Water trickling from a brook may be mistaken for the path of a known stream. These cognitive distortions are subtle, almost imperceptible, yet they guide choices in real time. The wilderness rewards caution and observation, but even those with acute awareness can be momentarily deceived. One of the most delicate moments occurs when certainty begins to waver. Have you ever been absolutely convinced of a direction, only to realize the environment looks entirely foreign within moments? That sensation, the gentle creeping of doubt, is where most missing hiker narratives quietly begin. It is not dramatic, not cinematic, not accompanied by shouting or alarm. It is a silent recognition that the familiar is no longer dependable. At that moment, the mind must choose. Pause, observe, retrace steps, or continue forward with hope and uncertainty. Each choice carries weight, amplified by isolation and distance. Decision-making under these conditions is influenced by both psychology and physiology. Stress hormones, subtle fear responses, and rising fatigue can alter thought patterns. A hiker may overestimate ability, underestimate risk, or fail to notice changes in terrain. Mental shortcuts, which serve humans well in predictable environments, become liabilities in the untamed expanses of nature. The same logic that navigates a city street. Trusting familiar markers, relying on habitual timing fails. When confronted with a canyon's vastness or a forest's dense layering, interestingly, the mind also creates its own markers to compensate. People remember sequences of visual cues, patterns of light, or textures of the ground. These mental maps guide movement when GPS or trails are unavailable. But these markers are fallible. A shifted rock, a seasonal growth of underbrush, or even a passing cloud-altering light angles can disrupt memory. And once memory is disrupted, perception begins to bend, creating a gentle but persistent drift away from certainty. In some cases, hikers respond by moving more quickly, attempting to regain confidence through action. Others pause, uncertain, oscillating between risk and caution. Both reactions carry subtle consequences. Speed may lead to missed signs or hidden obstacles. Hesitation may extend exposure to changing weather or daylight. Every movement interacts with the land's unpredictability, shaping outcomes quietly, invisibly. This delicate interplay between mind and environment explains why experienced hikers, equipped with knowledge and tools, can still find themselves lost. It is rarely dramatic or sudden. It is cumulative, a sequence of small errors, subtle misperceptions, environmental shifts, and fatigue. And it is silent. There is no audible warning, no flashing alarm. The mind and the land converse in whispers, and the listener must be attuned to both. Yet, within this tension lies opportunity. Awareness of these cognitive patterns can prevent escalation. Recognizing early moments of doubt, respecting the signals of fatigue, pausing to reassess surroundings, all of these can transform potentially confusing situations into manageable ones. The mind, when calm, observant, and patient, becomes a reliable guide, capable of navigating vast and complex terrain with care. Stories of lost hikers often focus on absence, but the psychological journey is equally compelling. The internal landscape, the shifting perceptions, the subtle stress, the quiet recalibration of judgment is part of the story that often goes unnoticed. Hikers recount moments of strange clarity amid confusion, intuition guiding steps when memory falters, moments of serene observation that steady the body and mind. These instances reveal that the wilderness is not just a physical space, but a cognitive and emotional one as well. And sometimes, the mind finds unexpected resilience. In moments of fatigue or disorientation, people discover creativity and adaptability. Alternate routes are considered. Patterns in the landscape are recognized. Decisions emerge not from panic, but from calm, attentive observation. These small victories often go unrecorded, yet they are part of why most hikers eventually return safely, and why only a minority remain missing. By understanding how perception, memory, and judgment interact with the land, we gain insight into the underlying causes of disappearances. It is rarely mystery, rarely conspiracy. Instead, it is the meeting of human limitation and environmental complexity, where ordinary choices are magnified by the scale and subtlety of nature. The wilderness teaches patience and observation. It asks for humility. It challenges assumptions and rewards awareness. The mind, engaged and careful, becomes a partner in this relationship. Missteps are quiet, not dramatic. Lessons are embedded in everyday interactions with the land, the misjudged slope, the obscured marker, the shifting light. And as hikers navigate these vast spaces, the mind records, recalibrates, and adapts. Each choice, each pause, each observation contributes to understanding, awareness, and ultimately, survival. It is within this quiet, attentive dialogue between human and wilderness that the true story unfolds, not one of fear, but of discovery, of limits, of adaptation. In this way, the psychological landscape mirrors the physical one, layered, nuanced, challenging, but navigable with care and attention. The mind and land, in concert, shape the paths we take, the stories we leave behind, and the moments we carry forward, whether returning safely or becoming part of the quiet narratives that linger in forests, canyons, and mountains. And as the mind navigates uncertainty, the next chapter turns to the subtle patterns we think we see and the delicate balance between perception and reality. Chapter 6. Patterns in the Silence. When we think of patterns, We often imagine something neat, tidy, predictable. A row of stars, a ticking clock, footprints in sand. But in the wilderness, patterns are less orderly. They exist quietly, almost imperceptibly, and often only reveal themselves in hindsight. For those who study missing hiker cases, the idea of a pattern is both magnetic and elusive. You look at decades of search rescue reports, at maps dotted with pins and grids, at lists of names, ages, and last known locations. You notice similarities: a stream near the last sighting, a ridge overlooked, a sudden weather shift. But the pattern is not something that hits you instantly. It emerges slowly, like shapes forming in clouds or like shadows stretching across a canyon floor as the sun lowers. Many people are drawn to the concept of a pattern because it offers a sense of control. If disappearances follow predictable paths, then perhaps they can be anticipated. Perhaps they can be prevented. And in some ways, this is true. Nature does follow rules. Water flows downhill. Snow melts with warmth. Cliffs exist where the earth has resisted time. Experienced searchers use these rules constantly, predicting where someone might have gone based on terrain, human behavior, and instinct. Yet the perceived patterns that capture public imagination often blend fact and interpretation. Some clusters of missing hiker cases seem unusual because of sheer visibility. Parks like Yosemite, the Grand Canyon, and Yellowstone are heavily traveled and heavily monitored. A disappearance in these areas is more likely to be reported widely, discussed online, and remembered in local lore. It's not that the wilderness is inherently more mysterious there. It's that more people witness, more people care, and more information flows. Patterns also emerge from human psychology. Our brains are wired to seek connections. We notice repetition, even when it might be coincidence. If a hiker disappears near a river in one park, and another hiker disappears near a river in a different park, we tend to link them. If a trail curves past granite cliffs and a story follows, we sense a motif. We crave narrative. We need it. Without it, absence feels unsettling, incomplete. This is why some researchers, like David Paulides with his Missing 411 series, have documented clusters of cases highlighting unusual elements. Hikers vanishing near water, in granite terrain during sudden storms, or along trails that are familiar. These clusters captivate because they suggest a hidden order, something beneath the surface of ordinary accident reports. They speak to curiosities. The same curiosity that has drawn humans into forests, canyons, and mountains for millennia. And yet, skeptics and statisticians point out another truth. The apparent patterns are often amplified by perception. A dense cluster on a map may reflect visitor density, trail frequency, or reporting practices rather than a true anomaly. When you overlay cases with the number of people on trails, the terrain's difficulty, or seasonal weather conditions, what seemed unusual often aligned with the ordinary risk. In other words, patterns exist, but they are not always the ones we think we see at first glance. There is beauty in this ambiguity. The wilderness is not orderly, but it is comprehensible. It behaves consistently, even when humans struggle to interpret it. Streams still flow according to gravity. Animals follow instincts. Trees grow where the sun and soil allow. Understanding these rules gives searchers a quiet advantage, a framework to anticipate movement, and a guide to place resources efficiently. For those who have spent hours poring over cases, the process of seeking patterns becomes a meditation. You track each variable: age, skill, trail conditions, weather, equipment. You chart distances from the last known point, overlay terrain features, and calculate probable movement. Every data point tells a story, not just of what happened, but of how humans interact with the land. Yet even as patterns emerge in reports, the wilderness itself refuses to confirm them. Trails shift, rivers flood, rocks slide, snow hides familiar markers. What seems predictable on paper can feel uncertain on the ground. This tension between statistical expectation and lived experience is where much of the mystery resides, not in malevolence, not in conspiracy, but in the sheer complexity of the world. Another aspect of these patterns is how they intersect with human behavior. People tend to make similar choices, selecting well-known trails, following water sources, hiking at certain times of day. They respond to similar visual cues, choosing paths that look safest, avoiding dense brush, descending slopes that appear gentle. When multiple people behave in comparable ways, outcomes can echo, producing clusters in time and space. Patterns, in this sense, are as much about human nature as they are about the land. Sometimes, the most striking patterns are revealed in the unexpected. A hiker may vanish near a small, unremarkable stream or within sight of a ranger station. Others may be found days later, having retraced steps unknowingly, creating a narrative of circularity and chance. These stories fuel imagination, yet they also offer lessons. Even familiar terrain can become confusing under the right or wrong conditions. Even routine behavior can interact with environment unpredictably. It is also worth noting that patterns are not inherently sinister. They are tools, guides, and sometimes warnings. They help search and rescue teams decide where to concentrate efforts, what terrain requires special attention, and which environmental factors could influence survival. Observing patterns does not require fear. It requires attentiveness, patience, and an understanding that complexity does not equal danger. It equals information. Many missing hiker stories, when viewed through the lens of patterns, reveal common threads: fatigue, changing weather, terrain features that obscure visibility, and choices made under stress. Sometimes the connections are subtle: a hiker's pack weight, the timing of a lunch break, the way a trail divides. These details matter because human decision-making interacts with the environment constantly. The wilderness is not waiting to deceive us. It simply acts as it always has, indifferent to our expectations. In the end, recognizing patterns is an exercise in humility. It teaches that the world operates according to rules that can be observed and respected, but not controlled. It reminds us that disappearance is often the product of ordinary circumstances, compounded by subtle shifts rather than something extraordinary. This is why training, preparation, and awareness are more powerful than fear or speculation. For families, researchers, and searchers, patterns are both comforting and sobering. They suggest predictability, a framework for understanding, yet they also reveal the limits of knowledge. No map, no statistic, no observation can fully remove uncertainty. Each trail, each forest, each canyon has its own rhythm, and the people who move within it must adapt, notice, and respond quietly, carefully, and consistently. Even as stories circulate online with viral maps and charts illustrating clusters, it is important to remember that patterns are only part of the picture. Behind every data point is a human life. Behind every cluster is a decision, a moment, a step taken into the unknown. Patterns are guides, not answers. They illuminate, but they do not resolve the inherent unpredictability of the world. What patterns do reveal, however, is an opportunity for learning. They remind hikers to plan, to check weather reports, to carry essentials, to respect turnaround times, and to observe both the land and their own limits. They help rangers anticipate where a missing hiker might go. They inform research that seeks to understand the subtle interaction between human behavior and environment. And perhaps most importantly, they teach patience. Patterns emerge slowly, sometimes over decades of observation. They reward careful attention more than rapid judgment. They unfold not in moments of panic, but in the quiet, sustained practice of noticing, recording, and reflecting. When considered this way, patterns are not terrifying. They are instructive. They invite curiosity rather than fear. They encourage understanding rather than speculation. And they reinforce a central truth: the wilderness operates according to its own laws, and humans, while capable and creative, must navigate it with awareness, respect, and care. Every pin on a map, every cluster of reports, every repeated coincidence is part of a larger story. A story not of mystery or malevolence, but of the subtle and intricate dance between humans and the land. The patterns are there, quietly waiting for attention, silently teaching lessons about perception, judgment, and humility. And in this awareness, The wilderness begins to speak, not in absence or threat, but in guidance, urging those who listen to notice, prepare, and respond thoughtfully. Because understanding the patterns even imperfectly can make the difference between confusion and clarity, between extended search and timely return, between anxiety and calm. And as we trace these patterns, we begin to see not just data, but the quiet stories of the land and the people who journey through it. Chapter 7. The Mind in the Wild. The wilderness has a way of quieting the world, of removing the usual distractions, leaving a person with only themselves and the landscape around them. At first, this feels peaceful. It's why millions step into national parks each year, for that rare, uncluttered clarity, for the soft hush of wind through trees, the gentle ripple of streams, the way sunlight filters through the canopy. But there is another side to this stillness, a subtle, almost invisible pressure that can alter perception. Slow reactions, and sometimes lead even the most experienced hiker astray. When someone disappears, psychology often plays a larger role than most people realize. It is rarely sudden fear that leads to a hiker straying off course. Usually, it begins with small, human decisions. Choosing a shortcut to save time, deciding to follow an animal trail, pausing to admire a view while the light fades. Every decision seems ordinary in the moment. Every step seems rational, and yet, slowly, the mind can shift in ways that feel almost imperceptible. Imagine a hiker who has been walking for hours. Their muscles are tired, but not exhausted. Their mind is alert, but the rhythm of the trail begins to blend together. Trees look alike. Rocks repeat in similar shapes. A bend in the path appears familiar, yet the next one does not. Each step is taken with confidence, but that confidence is built on assumptions. The belief that the trail signs will match memory, that the map aligns perfectly with reality, that the instincts honed over years will guide safely. This is where the subtle illusions begin. The mind craves continuity. It prefers patterns, even when those patterns are incomplete or misleading. A hiker may see a familiar ridge and assume they have been there before, following an internal map that may no longer align with the physical terrain. Minutes can pass without awareness of deviation. Distance from the last known point increases quietly, almost unnoticed, until the hiker realizes they are somewhere unfamiliar. But even then, the first thought is not panic. It is puzzlement. A question. Did I take a turn too soon? Curiosity often drives exploration further. People push onward, thinking that continuing will resolve the confusion, and it often does, but sometimes it deepens uncertainty. The mind's ability to rationalize, to fit new observations into familiar frameworks, can backfire in wilderness conditions. A fallen tree is interpreted as a landmark that is supposed to be there. A river bend is assumed to lead toward the intended destination. Every assumption builds a quiet maze that is invisible to anyone who might later attempt a rescue. Environmental factors amplify these effects. Low sunlight, shadows, and reflections can mislead perception. Wind may carry distant sounds, confusing a hiker's sense of direction. The smell of damp earth or smoke can suggest proximity to campsites or people that are actually far away. Even the rhythm of a flowing stream can distort distance perception. A gentle bend may seem like a gradual path, but hides steep drop-offs beneath. Fatigue compounds the effect. Physical exhaustion affects judgment, slows reaction time, and diminishes spatial awareness. A hiker who could navigate a trail perfectly in the morning may find the same path disorienting by evening. Decision-making becomes slower, and the ability to reassess assumptions weakens. A subtle choice, like deciding to rest beside a stream instead of climbing back to the main trail, can have cascading consequences. Emotional state matters. Too mild frustration or impatience can prompt a hiker to deviate from a planned route. Anxiety, even if unacknowledged, heightens sensitivity to environmental cues while simultaneously narrowing focus, causing one to overlook critical markers. Loneliness in the wilderness. Long stretches with no one else around can create mental echoes, a heightened awareness of every movement, sound, and sensation. It's both meditative and disorienting. Sometimes hikers rely on technology for guidance. GPS units, satellite communicators, or smartphones. While useful, these devices can give a false sense of security. Signals may falter, maps may be outdated, batteries may drain. The mind interprets a brief GPS glitch as a temporary inconvenience, not a sign of potential misdirection. That brief lapse is enough to nudge the hiker off course, setting the stage for further disorientation. Cognitive biases also play a role. The confirmation bias, seeing what you expect to see, can make a hiker reinterpret landmarks incorrectly. The availability heuristic, remembering previous hikes vividly, may mislead judgments about the present terrain. A hiker who once reached a certain waterfall quickly may assume the same path will work this time, overlooking subtle differences in the trail or conditions. Interestingly, the mind often maintains calm through rationalizations. Even when a person senses something is off, they might dismiss it. I'll just go a little further. I'll recognize the next landmark. I'm experienced enough to handle this. These are not recklesses. Thoughts, they are the mind's attempt to maintain stability, to avoid panic. Yet in wilderness conditions, small errors multiply quietly. Experience is protective, but not infallible. Even skilled hikers, those who have spent decades in the wild, can succumb to the subtle mental shifts that occur under fatigue, stress, or distraction. Familiar trails can feel foreign. Small forks in the path can mislead. The mind's reliance on memory, intuition, and expectation is a double-edged sword. Search and rescue studies have shown that missing hikers often travel in a pattern that reflects cognitive biases more than random movement. They follow water sources, descend gradually toward presumed safety, or hug natural contours in the landscape. These paths are logical from a human perspective, yet they can carry hikers away from actual trails, increasing the search area and prolonging uncertainty. This interplay between mind and environment is a silent teacher. It shows that navigation is not just a physical act, but a mental one. The wilderness tests the mind as much as the body. There is also an element of adaptation. Hikers may unconsciously change routines in response to subtle environmental cues. A sudden wind might slow steps. A distant sound may prompt a pause. A shadow might influence a choice of direction. These adaptations are instinctive, yet they can interact unpredictably with existing errors, creating a chain of decisions that lead away from intended paths. Psychology also shapes the stories after the fact. Families, rescuers, and observers interpret behavior through narrative frames. Bravery, error, misfortune. Each interpretation colors the perceived cause, yet the original decisions were often ordinary, subtle, and entirely human. Understanding this perspective requires empathy as well as analysis, recognizing that mistakes are rarely dramatic. They are quiet, cumulative, and entirely plausible. The wilderness, in this way, becomes a mirror. It reflects choices back with amplified clarity. A lapse in attention that might be inconsequential in a park parking lot can cascade into hours of misdirection on a trail. A misjudged rest can turn into extended exposure. A distracted thought can shift a path slightly, enough to make recognition at the next fork difficult. Even the most experienced minds are susceptible. That is the lesson hidden in the psychology of missing hikers. Knowledge, skill, and preparation dramatically increase safety, but they do not guarantee certainty. The mind, like the land, is dynamic. It responds to conditions, fatigue, and subtle environmental cues in ways that can surprise even those who feel most confident. Yet, despite these risks, the wilderness is forgiving when approached with respect. Small adjustments, slowing down, observing landmarks, checking orientation frequently, resting appropriately, and staying aware of internal states can prevent a quiet drift into disorientation. Awareness becomes both shield and compass. It transforms the mind from a passive participant into an active guide, attuned to the subtleties of trail, light, and landscape. In the end, psychology teaches us that missing is rarely a single dramatic event. It is a series of quiet shifts, decisions made with confidence, fatigue, and expectation. Each moment seems harmless, even rational, until the accumulated effect reveals itself. The mind in the wild is both capable and vulnerable, observant yet fallible. Understanding this allows hikers, families, and searchers to approach wilderness with care, curiosity, and humility. Because the wilderness does not need to be frightening to challenge us. It is enough that it is vast, intricate, and alive in its own rhythm. The mind must learn to move in harmony with it, or risk losing the thread of certainty. In the quiet moments, when the trail goes silent, and as the mind stretches across the trails, learning both trust and caution, the stories of those who disappeared begin to form subtle patterns, waiting for discovery. Chapter 8. Patterns of Perception. It is a curious thing how the human mind searches for order, even when the world around it is indifferent. When hikers vanish, when trails that were once familiar stretch into unfamiliar territory, our minds instinctively reach for patterns, for explanations, for something that ties the incidents together. This is not superstition, nor is it fear. It is simply the way we process the unknown. We seek meaning to soothe uncertainty, to quiet the whispering questions that arise when someone fails to return. People began noticing clusters of disappearances long before social media made them visible. A trail that seemed calm and ordinary suddenly felt uncanny when 2 or 3 visitors went missing. Within a span of a few years, granite cliffs, rushing rivers, sudden weather changes, they became touch points for the imagination. Signs that perhaps there was more to these vanishings than meets the eye. In the late 20th century, searchers like David Polides compiled lists of cases noting curious similarities. Experienced hikers gone from well-marked trails, canine units losing scent trails abruptly, and disappearances occurring near particular natural features, like lakes, boulder formations, or dense forests. But patterns are tricky. The mind does not always distinguish between coincidence and causality. When someone steps into the forest, they encounter countless variables. Sunlight through leaves, shadows on the trail, the murmur of a stream, the scent of damp earth. Each element is unique. Yet when we examine multiple cases, our brains instinctively cluster these experiences, seeking threads that may not exist. The illusion of a pattern is often stronger than the pattern itself. Consider a map dotted with red pins, marking missing hiker locations. At first glance, it appears alarming. Clusters emerge, lines crisscross, points overlap, but when overlaid with visitor density maps, the picture softens. Many of the same clusters exist simply because those trails are heavily traveled. Popularity, accessibility, and terrain difficulty all influence where incidents occur. The wilderness itself does not discriminate. It is our presence and activity that shape the landscape of risk. Yet these patterns captivate the imagination. They provoke stories, forums, documentaries, and social media discussions. A single case, like Austin King's disappearance in Yellowstone, becomes part of a wider tapestry, a narrative thread that draws attention to other incidents. People begin to notice repetition. Skilled hikers vanishing on routine paths, sudden weather changes preceding a disappearance, streams, or granite features near the last known location. And while each case is unique, the human mind instinctively seeks order in the chaos. This is where perception and psychology intersect. Our cognitive biases, like the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, make clusters appear more meaningful than they are. Once we are aware of a pattern, or think we are, we begin to see it everywhere. Every new report reinforces the perceived connection, even if the underlying causes are ordinary. Fatigue, whether terrain or simple misjudgment. We notice what we expect to see, and in doing so, amplify the story. The Missing 411 series, with its meticulous records and striking anecdotes, amplified these perceptions further. Cases were collected and categorized, drawing attention to unusual elements. Lost hikers found in unexpected places, search dogs unable to track scents, sudden disappearances despite favorable conditions. These stories captured imaginations because they were detailed, carefully documented, and presented with an air of quiet authority. Supporters interpreted patterns, skeptics questioned methodology, and the public watched, fascinated. And yet, even within this debate, the true lesson is subtle. The patterns that intrigue us most are rarely supernatural. They are human, they are environmental. They are the ordinary factors that, when combined, create outcomes that feel extraordinary. One hiker underestimated the heat, another misread a trail marker, a third misjudged the current of a stream. Each factor alone seems trivial. Together, they create incidents that linger in memory and imagination. Social media has added another layer to these perceptions. Viral maps, forum threads, TikTok videos. Each acts like a lens, bringing certain cases into sharper focus, while leaving countless others unnoticed. Algorithms amplify the stories that generate curiosity and engagement. Communities debate theories, share personal hiking experiences, and speculate on anomalies. In rare instances, tips shared online have helped locate missing persons. But, more often, the discussions fuel a sense of mystery. The wilderness becomes a stage where real-life events, perception, and narrative intersect. Interestingly, even the experts acknowledge that human pattern recognition is both a tool and a trap. Search and rescue coordinators rely on pattern analysis to predict likely locations, understanding how hikers tend to move when lost. They consider terrain, water sources, trail forks, and visibility. But they also know that perceived mysterious patterns can mislead. A hiker may stray in an unexpected direction, influenced by subtle environmental cues or personal decisions that no map or probability chart could predict. This duality between observed reality and perceived pattern creates a quiet tension. On one hand, we gain understanding. On the other, imagination fills the gaps. Stories of vanishings, unsettling, now weave together, forming a tapestry that feels larger than life. Each missing person adds a stitch, each search effort a quiet echo, each forum post a soft murmur in the collective consciousness. And yet, the beauty of this narrative lies not in fear, but in fascination. Curiosity drives us to ask, why does the wilderness seem to pull people into these mysteries? Why do certain features recur in stories, even if only coincidentally? How do ordinary environmental conditions and human choices combine to create situations that feel extraordinary? These questions invite reflection rather than alarm. They encourage humility and awareness. The patterns we perceive also remind us of the delicate balance between preparation and chance. A hiker with a map, GPS, and sufficient provisions may still experience disorientation. If fatigue clouds, judgment, or weather shifts suddenly. Another, less experienced, may rely on intuition and careful observation to navigate the same terrain successfully. The wilderness is impartial, responding only to the actions taken within it. Patterns emerge not from design but from consequence. Historically, people have always sought meaning in events that challenge expectations. The stories of lost hikers follow this tradition. By examining clusters, noting similarities, and exploring circumstances, we honor both curiosity and memory. We remember the individuals who disappeared, reflect on their experiences, and attempt to understand how ordinary factors intersect to create outcomes that are far from ordinary in human perception. Yet for all the fascination, it is crucial to maintain perspective. The vast majority of park visitors complete their journeys safely. Most incidents resolve quickly, and long-term disappearances are rare. Still, the quiet patterns we notice serve as gentle reminders. Attention, awareness, and humility are essential companions on any trail. They remind us to check our bearings, respect environmental forces, and acknowledge the subtle influence of our own minds. By recognizing the ways our perceptions shape the stories we tell, we can engage with mystery without being misled. The perceived patterns are not lies. They are reflections of curiosity, awareness, and interpretation. They illustrate the delicate interplay between environment, human psychology, and chance. Each pattern, each cluster, each anecdote becomes part of a broader tapestry that tells us something profound about our relationship with the wild. We are both capable and vulnerable explorers and learners, witnesses to our own limitations, as well as the vastness of the world around us. In the end, patterns of perception are not about solving a mystery with a single answer. They are about observing carefully, thinking critically, and moving through the world with attentiveness and respect. They remind us that while the mind searches for order, the wilderness follows its own rules, indifferent to expectation, yet responsive to awareness. And it is in this balance, between observation and humility, curiosity and caution, that we find the real lesson of the wilderness. The stories that seem strange, the clusters that appear significant, are invitations to reflect, to learn, and to prepare. They are reminders that nature is vast, human perception is delicate, and that awareness can illuminate paths through the quietest and most mysterious places. And as curiosity continues to weave through these tales, the stories shaped by observation and imagination gently blend with the lessons of evidence and insight, leading us deeper into understanding. Chapter 9. Timing and the Flow of Disappearances. Time moves differently in the wilderness. Seconds stretch when you are alone on a trail. Minutes blur when the sun dips behind a ridge. And hours can vanish unnoticed in the quiet of a forest. For those who go missing, and for those who search for them, time becomes both a measure and a Mysterian element that shapes perception, memory, and hope. Understanding when disappearances happen, and why certain periods seem more fraught than others, is a journey into rhythm, circumstance, and human interaction with nature. For decades, the story of missing hikers unfolded sporadically. A single case here, a long search there, isolated incidents that rarely gained national attention. Local newspapers carried brief reports. Communities shared word-of-mouth stories. And then, almost impossibly, patterns began to emerge. The stories didn't change. They only grew visible as technology and communication evolved. Social media, online forums, and 24-hour news cycles turned isolated events into shared experiences. People no longer had to hear about a disappearance weeks later. They could follow the search in near real time, watching maps, reading updates, and speculating about causes. Certain years, however, stand out more sharply. Late 2024 was one of them. Cases like Austin King's disappearance in Yellowstone seemed to cluster not because the environment had changed, but because public awareness had shifted. Visibility amplified perception. Every search update, every tip shared online, every news story created a sense of urgency, curiosity, and collective attention. The timeline of public fascination began to accelerate, even as the timeline of actual incidents remained largely consistent. Early 2025 saw similar dynamics. Recoveries like Michelle Van X offered a glimmer of hope amid unresolved cases, adding contrast to the narrative. Some hikers returned safely, others did not, and the juxtaposition made people reflect more deeply. Why do some vanish without a trace, while others emerge seemingly unharmed? Is it luck, preparation, instinct, or simply circumstance? Questions multiplied as stories circulated, and the collective consciousness began to recognize cycles, even if they were subtle. Looking back historically, some patterns do emerge, though not in ways that suggest conspiracy or anomaly. Many disappearances occur during peak hiking seasons, spring and summer when trails are accessible. Snow has receded, and the weather seems favorable. Others occur during sudden weather shifts, when a warm morning gives way to cold fronts, or unexpected storms. Even experienced hikers can misjudge conditions. The timing of disappearance is often a quiet combination of opportunity, environmental change, and human decision-making. Seasonal factors also play a role. Winter, with its snow and ice, creates unique hazards. Trails that were clear in the fall become treacherous, visibility drops, and the cold challenges both body and mind. Conversely, summer brings heat, sun, exposure, and rapid dehydration, especially in canyons and desert parks. In each case, timing interacts with the landscape and human behavior to create moments when hikers are more vulnerable. But it is not just seasons that matter. Time of day shapes perception as well. Early mornings carry the quiet of untouched trails, yet shadows can obscure paths, and sudden fog can erase familiar landmarks. Afternoons offer warmth and longer daylight, but bring exhaustion, changing light angles, and the risk of underestimating distance. Even the simplest decisions, when to start, how long to rest, when to turn back, are affected by time, often in ways that compound unpredictably. Historical incidents illustrate these nuances. The disappearance of Dennis Lloyd Martin in 1969 took place on a spring outing, when daylight was longer and the park was awakening from winter. Yet despite favorable conditions, he vanished. In contrast, cases like Zhongyun Wan in the Grand Canyon, 2017, occurred in the heat of summer, where environmental factors such as temperature, water, and steep terrain played critical roles. Each story is anchored in time, and yet each demonstrates how even ordinary moments can shift into uncertainty. Technology has changed the perception of timing as well. Real-time tracking, GPS updates, and emergency alerts compress the gap between event and awareness. A hiker's disappearance can now be known within hours, or even minutes. Yet, this speed of information does not always change the outcome. While alerts help mobilize search teams quickly, nature continues on its own schedule. Streams flow, fog rises, and falls animals move across trails. Shadows lengthen. Time in the wilderness follows rhythms that are not human-made in the pace of search, and discovery is always in dialogue with those natural cycles. Public perception of clusters also intensifies with timing, when multiple disappearances happen in a short span, even if coincidental. The impression of a pattern strengthens. Media reports compound this effect. Each new story is filtered through the lens of the previous ones. People begin to anticipate risk, imagine connections, and infer trends. Yet, when viewed over decades, statistical analysis shows that such clusters often align with visitor numbers, trail difficulty, and environmental hazards, rather than mysterious forces. Search and rescue teams understand timing in practical ways, too. They plan operations based on daylight, weather forecasts, and the physical limits of searchers and dogs. Helicopter flights are scheduled according to visibility and wind conditions. Teams work in shifts, ensuring that the clock continues to move in a disciplined, methodical way. Every hour saved in organization can be crucial. Every delay can complicate outcomes. Timing in this sense is both a tool and a challenge. There is also a psychological rhythm to timing. For families, hours stretch into days, and days into weeks. The passage of time without answers alters perception. Early hope can turn into anxiety, anxiety into despair, and yet resilience often emerges as families organize, advocate, and persist. For the public, following a case, timing shapes engagement. Early attention may be intense, but as weeks pass without resolution, curiosity wanes. The stories that remain in collective memory are often those where time itself seems suspended. Cold cases, prolonged searches, unresolved mysteries. Interestingly, timing interacts with environmental features in subtle ways. Certain areas of national parks become more dangerous at specific times, due to sun angles, river currents, or shifting rock faces. Trails that are safe in morning light may become confusing or treacherous in afternoon shadow. Weather can shift rapidly at higher elevations, turning calm moments into critical ones. In these instances, timing is not just a measurement, it is a factor that shapes outcomes directly. Through all this, one can see how the perception of timing affects both reality and storytelling. The human mind notices patterns, sometimes overemphasis in coincidence. Observers track clusters, assign significance to months, seasons, and sequences. But the truth is, a blend of natural cycles, human behavior, and circumstance. Timing matters, not because it is sinister, but because it interacts with countless variables: terrain, skill, preparation, chance, creating moments that seem extraordinary when viewed from a distance. In the end, studying timing is about understanding rhythm and consequence. It is about observing when conditions align to create opportunity and risk, about appreciating the subtle interplay between human action and natural cycles, and about learning how careful attention to time can influence safety. Timing does not control outcomes, but it frames them. Awareness of timing allows hikers to choose wisely: when to start, how long to stay, when to rest, when to turn back. For search teams, understanding timing enhances strategy, ensures safety, and maximizes efficiency. For families, it shapes expectations and patience, helping them navigate hope and uncertainty. Ultimately, timing in disappearances is less a mystery than a mirror, reflecting the interaction of people, place, and circumstance. The moments that feel extraordinary are often ordinary events colliding in sequence, amplified by attention and imagination. And in this delicate dance, the wilderness remains constant, quiet, indifferent, and patient, its rhythm a gentle but relentless guide. And as we learn to read the rhythm of the trails and the flow of time, we begin to see how locations, environment, and human choices converge to shape each story in subtle, revealing ways. Chapter 10. The Geography of Vanishing. The landscape itself tells a story, though it does so quietly, without words or signs. Mountains rise and fall in gentle undulations or jagged cliffs. Rivers wind through valleys, sometimes calm and shallow, other times rushing with surprising force. Forests stretch across ridges and plateaus, dense and shadowed, their floors scattered with leaves, roots, and hidden hollows. To a hiker, each step is a conversation with the land, its textures, its smells, its rhythm. Yet, when people go missing, geography becomes more than scenery. It becomes a map of possibility, a subtle actor in each disappearance. The American West dominates the discussion of missing hikers, and it is easy to see why. Parks like Yosemite, Yellowstone, Sequoia, and the Grand Canyon are vast and varied. They draw millions of visitors each year, offering landscapes that inspire awe and invite exploration. Granite monoliths in Yosemite, for instance, are beautiful and iconic, yet they conceal sheer faces, hidden crevices, and shifting shadows that can disorient even the most attentive walker. Rivers, which shimmer invitingly in the sunlight, can hide strong currents beneath calm surfaces, carrying someone downstream faster than anticipated. In these places, scale is part of the challenge. A trail may look short on a map, but in reality, distance, elevation, and obstacles combine to make each journey longer and more complex than imagined. Grand Canyon presents another kind of quiet peril. Its open expanse feels visible, even safe, yet heat, steep descents, and sudden drops create hazards that are easy to overlook. Imagine the sun climbing relentlessly, your water supply dwindling, and shadows lengthening across an already complex terrain. Even with experience, a hiker may make a single misstep, veer slightly off trail, or misjudge the pace required to return safely. The canyon's vastness can swallow these small errors, rendering a momentary lapse significant. Over 50 individuals have been reported missing here since 2018. Each case a reminder of how geography interacts with human limits. Yosemite, with over 30 cold cases spanning decades, also illustrates the subtle ways terrain influences outcomes. Names like Gary Matthias Eros in 1981 and Lucas Fisery in 2005 appear again and again, tied not to mystery, but to the realities of navigating granite walls, waterways, and dense forests. Elevation changes, sudden weather shifts, and hidden trails challenge even skilled hikers. The land is beautiful, inspiring wonder, yet it is impartial, responding only to the decisions of those who traverse it. Other parks, Yellowstone with its geysers and thermal pools, Sequoia with its towering redwoods, Mount Rainier with its glaciers and sudden storms, share similar dynamics. Scale, terrain, complexity, and volatile weather combined with human factors like fatigue, distraction, or underestimation to create incidents that stand out precisely because they are rare. Most visitors enjoy these parks without incident, but geography acts quietly as a teacher. Awareness and preparation are indispensable companions. Even seemingly simple terrain can be deceptive. Gentle slopes may hide loose rocks, hidden ditches, or sudden drop-offs. Trails that appear straightforward from a distance can twist unexpectedly, leading hikers into unfamiliar areas without warning. Streams may appear shallow, but conceal swift currents capable of unbalancing. A traveler, forest, flows, soft with moss, can hide uneven roots or holes. Each subtle feature adds complexity to navigation, and in combination with fatigue or changing light, the ordinary can become treacherous. Historical examples underscore these points. Dennis Lloyd Martin's 1969 disappearance in the Great Smoky Mountains occurred in terrain that, while popular and accessible, featured dense forest, uneven ground, and multiple intersecting paths. Xiong Yunwan's 2017 vanishing in the Grand Canyon illustrates how desert heat, expansive terrain, and hidden currents create unexpected hazards. Even Austin King in Yellowstone encountered rivers, dense tree lines, and sudden weather changes that complicated both his movement and the subsequent search. Geography, more than mystery, was a central actor in each story. The subtle power of geography also influences search and rescue operations. SAR teams must consider terrain type, elevation, vegetation, density, and accessibility when planning searches. Helicopters navigate ridges and valleys with precision, while canine units are deployed based on scent movement and ground conditions. Searchers own foot balance speed with caution, knowing that the landscape itself can be as challenging as the absence they are trying to resolve. Each search is a delicate negotiation with the land, a recognition that geography is both guide and obstacle. Public perception, however, often emphasizes the dramatic over the mundane. Maps, dotted with missing person locations, evoke fear, even when overlaying visitor density and terrain shows a logical explanation. Granite cliffs, canyons, and rivers become symbols of mystery. Photos and videos amplify impressions of scale and danger, while narratives highlight unusual features like boulder formations, waterfalls, or dense tree clusters. Yet for SAR professionals and those familiar with the terrain, these features are understood as part of the environment's natural complexity, not evidence of a conspiracy. A global perspective reinforces this understanding. Parallel cases appear in British Columbia, the European Alps, and other wilderness areas worldwide. Details vary. Different flora, different rock formations, different climates. But the underlying pattern is familiar. Challenging terrain, unpredictable environmental conditions, and human limitations converge to create incidents that, from afar, appear anomalous. Nature behaves consistently, indifferent to borders or human expectation. Subtle features of geography also shape memory and perception. Trails, twists, and fork, creating moments where orientation is lost. Streams and rivers serve as both navigational aids and obstacles. Elevation changes alter visibility and perception of distance. Forest density modifies sound and light, affecting how hikers perceive landmarks. The land communicates quietly, and attentive hikers respond. Those less aware may drift, disoriented and uncertain. Geography does not conspire. It informs. Even within the same park, differences in terrain and environment create unique challenges. A shaded forest path may seem benign until sudden fog reduces visibility. An open canyon may feel visible, yet sun angles, heat, and topography can mislead. These contrasts teach a quiet lesson. Scale and complexity are relative, and geography's influence is subtle but pervasive. It is also worth noting that geography interacts with technology. GPS signals can falter in deep canyons, under dense canopy, or near rock faces. Satellite communicators and emergency beacons aid survival, yet their effectiveness is shaped by terrain and line-of-sight conditions. A hiker relying solely on technology, without situational awareness, may find geography to be an unyielding teacher. Throughout history, the geography of vanishing has subtly guided narratives. The land itself does not take sides. It offers beauty, challenge, and perspective. Each missing hiker is a story of interaction between human choice and environmental influence. Terrain teaches lessons, quietly through experience, consequence, and observation. It reminds us that preparation, awareness, and respect are not optional, but essential. And yet, the landscapes that challenge us also inspire wonder. Granite cliffs, rushing rivers, towering trees, and expansive vistas evoke curiosity and reverence. In understanding geography, we also learn patience and attentiveness, appreciating the quiet rhythms of terrain, weather, and light. Geography does not merely set the stage for disappearances. It shapes the journey itself, offering lessons that are as profound as they are subtle. In examining the geography of missing hikers, we recognize that location is rarely mysterious. It is the combination of scale, complexity, environmental variability, and human interaction that makes incidents notable. Clusters of cases, when mapped carefully, reveal patterns of exposure and risk rather than hidden forces. They remind us that the wilderness operates on its own terms, impartial yet intricate, vast yet navigable with care and attention. Ultimately, understanding geography is a matter of mindfulness. Hikers who attend to the lay of the land notice subtle cues, respect environmental forces, and plan accordingly navigate more safely. Searchers who study terrain anticipate challenges, maximize efficiency, and respond with precision. Families to benefit from awareness. Understanding how the natural features of a park shape both risk and search strategy. In the quiet, reflective moments of walking a trail, the land communicates in ways both subtle and profound. The flow of a river, the incline of a ridge, the shadow of a tree, these are all elements that influence movement, perception, and outcome. By attuning ourselves to geography, we cultivate awareness that is protective, insightful, and deeply respectful of the wild. And so, the geography of vanishing is less a mystery of malevolent design, and more a tapestry of subtle interactions, human decisions, environmental conditions, and natural complexity, weaving together to create moments that linger in memory and narrative. The land teaches quietly, shaping stories and offering lessons to those who listen. With the landscapes and terrain now understood, the next step is to explore the human experience within these spaces, the choices, perceptions, and psychology that guide every step along the trail. Chapter 11. When searches stretch beyond days, time behaves differently in the wilderness. It stretches, contracts, and folds in ways that are subtle, almost imperceptible, until you realize hours have passed without a sound or a sign of someone you hope to find. Days can feel like a single long breath, while minutes stretch endlessly when the trail grows unfamiliar. In missing hiker cases, the first hours are crucial, but as searches extend beyond a day, the rhythm of time begins to shift for everyone involved: rescuers, families, and even the land itself. Search and rescue teams are the first to feel this temporal distortion. Their days begin before dawn, with crisp air that smells of pine or wet earth, depending on the park. They organize maps, check equipment, and strategize based on what they know about the terrain, weather, and habits of the missing individual. In these moments, there is a kind of calm urgency, focused, methodical, and careful, but as the hours pass without results, subtle tension accumulates. Every rustle in the leaves, every distant bird call, every wind shift becomes a potential clue. The mind sharpens, but it also stretches thin, learning to discern meaning from silence. As the search extends into the second or third day, teams rotate carefully to prevent fatigue, yet exhaustion is inevitable. The physical challenge is immense. Steep slopes, thick undergrowth, variable weather, and long stretches without shelter. The body becomes a rhythm of movement, hydration, and brief rests, while the mind remains alert, scanning for footprints, broken branches, disturbed vegetation, tiny signs that might indicate where someone has passed. Sleep is brief, often shallow, but even in those scarce moments of rest, the terrain continues to whisper. A night breeze can carry scents from distant rivers or hint at where snow has recently melted. Every detail matters, no matter how small. Families experience time differently. For them, the minutes stretch endlessly, each one filled with anticipation and anxiety. They replay the last conversations, check messages, recall habits, and wonder what decisions might have led to this absence. Some pace quietly, clutching jackets or backpacks, silently measuring the forest outside the park boundaries. Others sit in silence, listening for news, for phone calls, for anything that might provide reassurance. Time, in their experience, slows to a careful, etching rhythm, each second a gentle reminder of what is at stake. Communication plays a subtle yet important role in these prolonged searches. Rangers, SAR coordinators, and volunteers keep meticulous records. Coordinates last sightings, weather reports, and trail conditions. Radios buzz intermittently. Updates are passed from teams to headquarters, and new strategies emerge as terrain is surveyed. From different angles, helicopters scanning valleys from above. Canine units following scent trails that have grown faint. Coordination becomes a delicate choreography, balancing speed with accuracy. Every delay, every overlooked path could make a difference, yet all participants know the reality. Wilderness is vast, and the land does not yield its secrets quickly. Search duration also affects perception. The longer a person remains missing, the more uncertainty grows. Early optimism softens into careful hope, tempered by respect for the unpredictable nature of the wilderness. This is not panic, but a quiet awareness that even well-planned efforts must contend with forces beyond human control. Changing weather, shifting terrain, and the simple fact of scale. Mountains, rivers, and forests do not bend to schedules. They move in rhythms older and slower than any clock, and those who enter them must adapt. Historical examples illustrate the patience and endurance required. Take James Pruitt in Rocky Mountain National Park, missing since February 2019. SAR teams searched through winter snow and summer warmth, combining aerial reconnaissance with ground operations. Days turned into weeks, yet each team remained vigilant, adjusting plans as evidence or the absence of it emerged. The mountains offered no guidance, only terrain to interpret, and in that stillness, every decision carried weight. Similarly, Michelle Vanek's 2025 experience in Yellowstone highlighted both the resilience of search operations and the unpredictability of time in the wilderness. Her survival and eventual recovery reminded teams that even when days stretch long, hope remains a subtle, guiding current. Yet the contrast of cases, some resolved, some remaining unresolved, illustrates that time in wilderness is not a uniform measure. Each hour, each day, each search carries its own narrative, shaped by terrain, weather, and human choices. The psychological dimension of extended searches is equally profound. Volunteers and professionals alike experience a slow accumulation of tension and awareness. They notice patterns in the land, the angle of light in the early morning, the way fog settles in valleys, the subtle erosion of soil near riverbanks. These cues guide decisions, yet they also demand mental stamina. Mistakes can occur when fatigue clouds judgment, when anticipation overtakes observation, or when overconfidence leads to assumptions. Yet even as exhaustion grows, so too does a quiet vigilance, a rhythm of alertness that becomes almost meditative in its intensity. Families, on the other hand, occupy a different temporal space. Days of waiting stretch, emotions thin, but small routines help maintain grounding. Checking messages, coordinating with SAR, preparing food or water, taking short walks near trailheads. Sleep comes unevenly, often interrupted by thoughts or imagined scenarios. Conversations shift between hope and pragmatism. Stories of the person missing recalling laughter, habits, quirks, memory and imagination entwine, creating a narrative bridge across the hours, connecting the present to the past and sustaining belief in eventual resolution. The duration of a search also allows the land itself to interact with both those who seek and those who wait. Seasonal changes, temperature, wind, precipitation, introduce subtle challenges. Rivers swell or recede, snow melts or drifts accumulate, fog rolls in, and shadows lengthen. Wildlife activity shifts in response. These elements, unnoticed on a single visit, gradually influence the rhythm of search efforts. SAR teams must continuously adapt, learning from each hour and each observation, recognizing that the wilderness is a dynamic participant, not a static backdrop. It is in these extended searches that the patience and skill of responders truly shine. Coordination becomes layered. Aerial observations feed into ground patrols. Canine units track scent trails. Satellite devices provide intermittent positional data. Decisions are made with careful deliberation where to focus next, which paths to prioritize, how to balance urgency with safety. The land's vastness demands respect, and every choice reflects that understanding. Moreover, extended searches often bring communities together. Volunteers arrive from nearby towns. Hikers offer knowledge of trails. Local guides provide insight into hidden hazards. Communication networks, both formal and informal, allow knowledge to flow. In some cases, social media tips and observations, when filtered carefully, aid operations. The interplay between human coordination and the land's quiet guidance creates a complex, living system of search and response. Even when searches conclude either with recovery or the decision to pause, the experience leaves enduring impressions. SAR teams carry memories of the terrain, the rhythms of the operation, and the subtleties that prove decisive. Families carry memories of hope and vigilance, of moments when the forest felt impossibly vast, and of small victors' footprints found, belongings discovered, hints that someone passed through. The land, for its part, continues its quiet cycles, unconcerned and impartial, yet undeniably shaping the story of every individual who moves within it. Time, as measured in days of search, also informs culture and perception. The longer a person remains missing, the more stories emerge, quietly amplified by curiosity and concern. Patterns are considered, maps are annotated, and communities reflect collectively on the mysteries of scale, terrain, and human vulnerability. Yet beneath all these narratives, the core truth remains simple. The wilderness does not hurry, it does not intervene, and it only responds to those who traverse it with awareness and care. Through these extended searches, a subtle lesson emerges. Preparation, attention to detail, and respect for the rhythms of nature are as important as speed or technology. Every step, every observation, every small adjustment matters. The land is patient, but it tests those who move through it, revealing strengths, vulnerabilities, and the quiet consequences of each choice. Finally, there is the matter of closure, or its absence. Not every search resolves in a single moment or a clear outcome. Some conclude with recovery, some with continuing uncertainty. Each ending, resolved or unresolved, interacts with the fabric of memory, shaping how families, responders, and communities understand the wilderness. Extended searches teach endurance, awareness, and humility, not as a warning, but as a reflection of the delicate balance between human agency and environmental scale. In the end, the lesson of time in wilderness searches is clear. Hours and days are measured not just in clocks or calendars, but in observation, adaptation, and attention. The land, the people, and the missing hiker exist in a quiet interplay where patience, vigilance, and understanding are essential. And in this space, the story of a disappearance unfolds, not in dramatic headlines, but in subtle rhythms, careful observation, and the quiet hope that guides every step. With the stretch of time now understood, the next chapter turns to the tools and evolution of search and rescue itself, the human ingenuity and coordination that meet the vastness of the wilderness. Chapter 12. Walking smarter, not fearful. The wilderness is not a place that punishes recklessness loudly or dramatically. Instead, it offers subtle lessons, quiet nudges, gentle reminders, soft hints that your choices matter. And for those who listen, who move with attention and humility, the experience can be not only safe, but deeply enriching. In this chapter, we explore what it means to walk smarter, not fearful, through the forests, mountains, and valleys that call so many of us every year. Imagine stepping onto a trail at first light. The air is crisp, carrying the faint aroma of pine needles and damp earth. Mist lingers in the valleys below, curling around the trunks of trees like slow-moving fingers. You can hear the distant rush of a river and the occasional rustle of a deer in the underbrush. Every sense feels alive, alert, attuned. This is the frame of mind that transforms a hike from a simple walk into a dialogue with the wilderness, an awareness that is protective, not fearful. Walking smarter begins long before the first step. Planning is the quiet foundation of every successful journey. Knowing the trail, the terrain, the weather, and your own physical limits is not a checklist to provoke anxiety, but a gesture of respect to the land. A map in hand is more than paper. It is a story of contours, rivers, ridges, and turns that have existed long before any human steps marked them. Checking forecasts does more than predict rain. It tells a story about temperature swings, storm patterns, and the potential for snow or ice that can change a familiar path into a challenging one within hours. Equipment, too, plays a role, not in creating fear, but in nurturing confidence. Boots that grip wet rocks, layers that adapt to sudden chills, water that sustains, and a first aid kit that can manage minor scrapes or blisters all speak to preparation. Even small gestures, like packing an extra snack or a flashlight, create a buffer against uncertainty. Each item is a quiet dialogue with the trail, an acknowledgement that the land is indifferent and humans must come prepared. But walking smarter is not only about gear. It is about choices made in the moment. Trails fork unexpectedly. A creek appears more forceful than it seemed from a distance. Fatigue seeps in after hours of walking, and a sense of routine can dull awareness. Here, mindfulness becomes essential. Observing footprints, listening to the sounds around you, noting subtle shifts in light and texture. All are small acts of attention that cumulatively protect and guide. A hiker who notices a sudden gust funneling through a canyon or a patch of ice on a slope is responding not to fear, but to insight. Sharing your plans is another quiet but powerful act. Letting someone know your intended route, expected return time, and checkpoints creates a human safety net. This simple gesture allows coordination and timely response if something unexpected occurs. Yet, it is not a surrender to fear. It is a practical acknowledgement that even the most skilled hiker cannot control every variable. The wilderness, after all, has its own pace. One that does not hurry for human convenience. Pacing oneself is another lesson. Hiking too fast can exhaust energy reserves, dull perception, and increase the chance of mistakes. Pausing to observe a river, listen to a bird, or examine the texture of a trail is not merely restful. It is protective. The body recovers, the mind refreshes, and subtle details are noticed that might otherwise be missed. Even short breaks, moments of quiet presence, become an act of attunement to the landscape. Yet preparation alone is not enough. Flexibility matters as much as planning. A familiar trail may behave differently, depending on rain, wind, or snow. A shortcut may appear enticing, but small detours can compound into confusion. Knowing when to turn back, when to rest, when to seek shelter is a sign of wisdom, not weakness. The wilderness rewards humility and punishes overconfidence. Quietly, often through minor mistakes that accumulate rather than dramatic misfortune. Technology, when used thoughtfully, becomes a tool, not a replacement for awareness. GPS devices, satellite communicators, and weather apps offer information, but only if interpreted and integrated with observation and judgment. A device can point to a location, but it cannot warn of a sudden storm or a hidden cliff. Technology assists. It does not substitute for the human senses and decision-making that have guided hikers for centuries. Walking smarter also includes awareness of human limits. Fatigue, clouds, judgment, hunger, or dehydration reduces focus. Stress or worry can lead to hasty decisions. Attuning to these internal states, recognizing when to pause, when to eat, when to rest, is as essential as reading the trail itself. The wilderness tests both mind and body, and those who respect their own rhythms move with safety and grace. The emotional element of walking smarter is subtle but powerful. Confidence born of preparation and mindfulness replaces fear with calm curiosity. The hiker notices the light through leaves, the pattern of ripples on a stream, the way fog rolls over a distant ridge. These observations are not distractions. They are signals that the mind is engaged, present, and aligned with the environment. This state of attentive calm is protective. It allows one to anticipate, adapt, and respond to change without panic. There are practical routines that reinforce this mindset. Regularly checking bearings, maintaining clear water supplies, noting landmarks, and keeping communication devices charged are all acts that transform awareness into preparedness. Similarly, understanding the human body's needs, hydration, energy, warmth prevents subtle mistakes from escalating into larger problems. Small, consistent actions maintain equilibrium, allowing the wilderness to remain a place of exploration rather than peril. Examples from past cases illustrate these principles. Hikers who prepared carefully, who paused to observe subtle weather shifts, who communicated with rangers or companions, often fared well, even when conditions became challenging. Conversely, minor lapses, skipping a step in planning, underestimating distance, misreading a trail, can lead to temporary disorientation. The kind that, if uncorrected, may result in prolonged searches. These lessons are not warnings meant to frighten, but gentle guidance on respect and attentiveness. Walking smarter also fosters a subtle connection with the wilderness itself. Attention to detail enhances appreciation of natural patterns, from the curve of a river to the way sunlight filters through branches. Being attuned to the land enriches the experience, turning ordinary trails into immersive journeys. Observation, patience, and mindfulness become companions alongside boots, backpacks, and maps. Community, too, supports walking smarter. Conversations with local guides, learning from park rangers, reading trail notes, and listening to the experiences of others create a collective wisdom. This shared knowledge, when approached without fear, becomes a quiet scaffolding for individual decisions. You do not need to journey alone. Understanding the lessons of those who came before you is part of respectful, intelligent hiking. Preparation and awareness extend beyond the trail itself. Seasonal knowledge, recognizing snowmelt patterns, river currents, and wind tendencies, adds context. Knowing wildlife behaviors, plant hazards, oriden drop-offs, informs movement. Even the simple act of choosing daylight hours wisely shapes safety, allowing observation in optimal conditions. Every choice, while subtle compounds, to reduce risks. Ultimately, walking smarter is about agency within the wilderness. It is not fear-driven avoidance, but deliberate, conscious engagement. It acknowledges the land's indifference and the human responsibility to respond with care. Every step becomes both action and awareness. Every pause, a conversation with the environment. Every decision, a quiet negotiation between curiosity and caution. This approach transforms the narrative of missing hikers. Rather than framing the wilderness as a place of mystery to fear, it becomes a landscape to respect, understand, and navigate thoughtfully. Preparation, attention, flexibility, and mindfulness. These are the quiet tools that keep hikers safe. They do not diminish wonder. They enhance it. Every ripple in a stream, every glint of sunlight, every shift in wind becomes part of the immersive experience, rather than an omen. In this chapter, the lessons are simple but profound. Walk with awareness. Respect your limits. Observe the land. Use tools wisely. Pause when necessary. Communicate your plans. Adjust to conditions. Allow curiosity to guide without underestimating the environment. These are not dramatic actions, but they are transformative. They change the rhythm of your journey, and quietly, they can save lives. Walking smarter is not about avoiding the unknown. It is about moving through it with knowledge, respect, and calm confidence. It is about understanding that while the wilderness does not bend to human expectation, humans can adapt and respond with awareness and care. Every step becomes an act of intelligence, mindfulness, and subtle courage. And in this quiet approach, fear finds no foothold. Instead, the wilderness becomes a dialogue partner, a teacher, a companion for those who listen and respond. This is the mindset that transforms trails from potentially hazardous routes into paths of discovery, connection, and quiet fulfillment. Preparation, attention, and respect are not restrictions. They're invitations. Invitations to experience the wilderness fully, without panic, without recklessness, and without needless risk. And in those invitations, the stories of missing hikers are reframed, not as tales of fear, but as lessons in awareness, patience, and mindful engagement with the natural world. And as we conclude our guidance on walking smarter, we arrive at the final chapter, the quiet truths the wilderness teaches and the calm wisdom it offers to all who listen. Chapter 13. The truth the wilderness teaches. The wilderness speaks in silence, not the kind of silence that empties the world, but a quiet that is full of subtle instruction, a patient rhythm that rewards attentiveness and humility. It does not shout. It does not announce danger with sirens or banners. Instead, it moves at its own pace, soft, persistent, indifferent to human expectation. And in that very indifference lies the lesson every hiker, every wanderer, and every curious mind must learn. Imagine standing on a ridge at dawn. The first light drapes the valley in gentle gold, and a thin mist curls around the tips of distant trees. The trail you've walked winds below, like a quiet ribbon, littered with stones, leaves, and whispers of footsteps from those who came before. There is no sudden alarm here. There is only the slow realization that you are part of a system far older, far more robust than any human plan. The mountains do not care whether you are careful or reckless. The rivers do not judge your intent. The wind does not bend to your schedule. Nature, in its beautiful and indifferent way, simply is. This is the truth the wilderness teaches. The land is neither friend nor foe. It is a mirror. It reflects choices, attentiveness, and humility. It rewards preparedness and observation. It does not forgive mistakes, but it also does not conspire against you. Every lost hiker, every tale of disappearance, is not the result of malevolent forces or secret patterns. They are the quiet consequences of ordinary human limitations, environmental variables, and chance. Consider the seemingly simple act of choosing a trail. A familiar path may appear straightforward, inviting even but under certain conditions: sudden rain, fallen trees, snow melt, or confusing forks. This simple choice transforms into a delicate negotiation between human intent and natural unpredictability. Those who walk with awareness notice these subtle changes. Those who walk without thought may find themselves disoriented, not because the wilderness is cruel, but because the landscape is vast, and the variables are many. The wilderness also teaches about time. Nature does not follow our schedules. Rivers rise and fall in rhythms we cannot control. Shadows stretch and shrink as the sun arcs across the sky. Weather shifts without concern for our plans. Understanding this is not about fear. It is about respect. Observing patterns, noticing small changes in light, wind, or temperature, and adjusting accordingly are all part of this quiet dialogue. The land itself becomes a teacher, showing how patience, observation, and humility prevent missteps. But the truth extends beyond the landscape itself. It includes the human mind and body, and how they interact with the environment. Fatigue clouds judgment, dehydration slows reflexes, and stress distorts perception. Even the most experienced hiker can make simple errors when under pressure. Awareness, mindfulness, and preparation act as the counterbalance. They transform vulnerability into understanding, uncertainty into measured decision-making. Stories of missing hikers, when viewed through this lens, are no longer merely tales of fear. They are lessons in attentive movement, in careful planning, and in respect for both one's limitations and the subtle power of the natural world. A hiker who pauses to listen to the wind in the pines, to watch the shifting light on a stream, is not only experiencing beauty, they are learning, observing, and adjusting. Each action is a conversation with the wilderness, a quiet negotiation that keeps one safe. Families and rescuers also carry the wisdom of the land. Search and rescue teams learn to anticipate conditions, to read trails, and to recognize patterns that may seem invisible to casual observers. They move with patience, methodically, understanding that time, terrain, and subtle environmental cues are critical to success. Families who prepare, communicate, and respect the unknown in turn participate in this dialogue indirectly, creating a network of mindfulness and shared knowledge. Even technology, when used wisely, becomes an extension of awareness rather than a replacement. GPS, satellite devices, and communication tools can enhance observation, but they do not replace intuition, experience, or presence. A battery dies, a signal fades, a screen may mislead, but attentive perception remains constant. The wilderness rewards those who combine preparation, observation, and respect. Curiosity, too, is part of the lesson. It is not to be feared, but gently guided. Asking questions about the land, noticing details, and observing patterns are tools for understanding, not signs of weakness or danger. When paired with mindfulness and humility, curiosity becomes a quiet compass. It allows hikers to explore fully while remaining safe. Perhaps the most profound lesson is about uncertainty. The wilderness teaches that not all answers are immediate, and not all paths lead directly to clarity. Some questions remain unanswered. Some trails hold mysteries that cannot be solved. But in embracing this uncertainty, calmly without panic, without fear, humans learn resilience, patience, and respect. The unknown is not a threat. It is a space for attentive presence. Nature also reminds us of interconnectedness. Every step interacts with the land. Every decision, Whether to rest, to turn back, to cross a river, or avoid it, shapes the experience. A small choice can ripple outward, influencing outcomes subtly yet significantly. The wilderness encourages awareness of these ripples, fostering mindfulness that extends beyond the trail into everyday life. Walking with respect also creates a quiet empathy for others who share the land. Fellow hikers, campers, rangers, and even the silent observers of wildlife all participate in the same rhythm, observing boundaries, sharing the trail responsibly, and noticing signs left by others preserves safety and harmony. The wilderness teaches that our actions matter not because nature demands it, but because our choices create balance within it. The stories of missing hikers then become less about fear or mystery and more about lessons lived. They are reminders that preparation, observation, patience, and humility can prevent misfortune. They show the value of communicating plans, reading environmental cues, pacing oneself, and respecting both one's limits and the land's vastness. These stories, once reframed, are gifts, gentle instruction from the landscape and its human companions. In this final reflection, it becomes clear that the wilderness does not need to be mysterious to be powerful. Its lessons are quiet but profound. It teaches respect for scale and time, for movement and stillness, for observation and adaptation. It shows that humans, though curious and capable, are always negotiating with forces far larger than themselves. The path is neither enemy nor ally. It is a guide, and those who walk attentively will always find it generous, even when it challenges them. The wilderness also instills a calm courage, not the kind born of dramatic heroics, but a steady confidence rooted in preparation and presence. Each hiker, each walker, each observer becomes part of a continuum. Those who came before, those who move now, and those who will follow. Learning from past stories, from the subtle patterns of terrain and weather, from the wisdom of rangers and fellow travelers, strengthens this quiet courage. Ultimately, the truth the wilderness teaches is simple, yet profound. Life in the wild is a partnership between human care and natural indifference. The land provides opportunity, wonder, and challenge. Humans provide attention, preparation, and respect. When these elements align, the experience is transformative, safe, illuminating, and deeply connected. And perhaps this is the most comforting lesson of all. Understanding, preparation, and mindfulness turn unknown risks into manageable journeys. The wilderness is vast and indifferent, yes, but humans, attentive and thoughtful, are capable of moving through it with calm and confidence. The stories of those who have gone missing are not warnings meant to frighten. They are guides showing where awareness can preserve life, where curiosity must be tempered with humility, and where respect for nature becomes the most profound protection of all. So the next time you step into the forest, the mountains, or along a quiet riverbank, remember every sensation, every choice, every pause is a conversation with the land. Listen closely, move attentively, let preparation, patience, and quiet observation guide you. The wilderness does not need to be feared to be revered. It only asks that you move thoughtfully, that you notice, and that you carry with you the lessons whispered by every stone, tree, and stream along the trail. Because in listening carefully, walking mindfully, and respecting the rhythm of the land, the mysteries fade into understanding. And in those understanding lies freedom, safety, and a profound, enduring connection to the world beyond ourselves. And so, with awareness as our companion, the journey through mystery ends, not in fear, but in quiet wisdom. The trail we have walked together is now quiet, yet it hums softly with the lessons of the land. Each mountain, each forest, each winding stream has whispered its truths, not in shouts but in subtle enduring wiles. Nature has shown that it is neither friend nor enemy, only vast, alive, and patient, and that humans curious and attentive can move through it with grace when they choose to listen. We have followed the paths of the missing, watched the careful steps of those who search, and lingered in the silent moments of waiting and reflection. We have seen how perception can magnify mystery, how stories grow faster than facts, and how even ordinary decisions can ripple outward into unexpected consequences. And through it all, we have discovered something quiet yet profound. The wilderness does not need to be feared to be revered. It asks only for observation, respect, and presence. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in the light carries meaning for those willing to notice. Each choice, each pause, each moment of attention becomes a dialogue with the world around us, teaching calm, awareness, and humility. And so, as you drift into your own quiet space, let these lessons settle. Let the rhythm of the mountains, the flow of rivers, and the patient rustle of leaves guide your thoughts. Carry with you the understanding that preparation, mindfulness, and respect are the true companions of the wild, far more powerful than fear, far more lasting than curiosity alone. The stories we have shared are not meant to alarm. They are gentle reminders, guides whispered through time, that careful attention can preserve life, that small choices matter, and that even in the vast, indifferent wild, humans can find harmony, wonder, and safety. Sleep now with the knowledge that the land is alive, patient and observant, and that so too is the spirit of anyone who walks within it with care. In listening, observing, and moving thoughtfully, we are never truly lost. The wilderness may remain vast and mysterious, but understanding, quiet, patient, and deliberate is the truest light we can carry along the trail.